I thought it was interesting the number of issues that came up that we had already discussed between 11:30 and 12. That
like a replay
the
of the first
purpose
half of the programme.
the daily politics, to make sure our viewers are well informed. By the time PMQs begin, Nick, what did you make of it?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it was a bit all over the place, but there was a very important announcement by the Prime Minister right at the top saying that there's going to be an investigation into what went in on the co-op. I mean, obviously, you can see why they want to do that. You had the chairman of a bank approved by the FSA who didn't seem to know the size of their assets. Famously, at the Treasury Select Committee, he thought it was 3 billion, turned out it was 47 billion. So there are serious issues there. There's also some politics there, because obviously the cooperative bank is part of the cooperative movement that is absolutely enmeshed in the Labour Party. Ed Balls is actually a Labour co-op MP, got £50,000 from the cooperative movement. So you can see the politics there. You can also see that Reverend Flower's appointment was approved by the FSA, which was set up by the last government, keen to focus on that, obviously, this government, and the FSA is obviously no longer in existence.
Yes, and it didn't even go to a second interview at the FSA.
Well, I think what happened was that
and the person who was involved in approving Mr. Flowers then got a job on the co-op board.
I think he had a pretty rigorous interview to get onto the board, but then when he was made chairman, it wasn't so rigorous. And obviously he's a bright guy, but doesn't know a huge amount about banking.
Michael Dugher, the point that Tony McNulty was making in his tweet that the Prime Minister quoted was that rather than going on, you know, who's bankrolling whom, where do the Tories get their money from, and so on, he should stick with living standards. That's what cuts through.
Yeah, I think we did that today, though, because he asked about Sure Start. So David Cameron confirmed that there are just over 3,000 Sure Start centres. What he didn't say is that something like 578 have been closed, and he promised not to close Sure Start centres. That is a cost of living issue, because we know cost of nursery places has gone up 30% under this government. We know that families are, on average, £1,600 a year, every year.
So you think it was linked?
Yeah, I think it's a cost of living issue. And it's also, by the way, cost of living is an economic issue.
What more can you tell us about this inquiry into the co-op?
Well, as the Prime Minister announced, he's going to ask the Chancellor to work with the regulatory authorities to find out the best way to get into this. And I think that the central point is really important. People trust this bank. It's always been, the co-op has always been the bank which claims to do ethical banking. It now transpires that they were doing very seemingly unethical loans at low interest rates to organisations.
Well, they're not unethical.
Just to get through this, organisations without the balance sheet or the assets to support the loan. Now, you know, clearly there's a question to answer there, but the big picture is, you know, if this is the mess that Labour are in with their own banking arrangements, with their own facilities, and between, you know, Balls and Miliband himself, then can you imagine what it would be like if they were running the country? The answer is we need to keep them away from that.
Yeah, I didn't ask you about that, though. I asked you just to tell us a bit more about what is, I assume, will not be a party political loaded inquiry into co-op.
No. This is very important for people who invest in that bank with them, to know that a bank that seems to have now, we can see, gone off track is brought back on and reassures investors and people who bank with them.
The hedge funds who are bailing this out are going to end up owning 70% of the co-op because they're going to help recapitalise the balance sheet. The balance sheet simply hasn't got enough money on it to justify its actions. But after what's happened this week, these hedge funds may say, this bank is tarnished. The brand of this bank is in real trouble, particularly since its unique selling point was the ethical nature of its business. If these hedge funds do not proceed with the recapitalisation, it's about 1.5 billion we're looking at, the Bank of England will have to bail it out, correct?
Well, look, I don't want to say things which precipitate further issues for the bank, but I will say this. It is clear that things have gone wrong. That purchase of, or takeover of Britannia, which happened, and we need to understand better, I think, the circumstances of that, seem to get it into further difficulty. I think there's an awful lot to be looked into. How do you end up with leading figures, as Reverend Flowers, who actually, it turns out, seems to have known nothing at all about banking, at its head? These are serious issues for investors, for people who bank with them. We need to look into them, and we need to understand all of that. And as I say, a bank which has, I don't think you're a co-op MP, you're a Unite MP, aren't you? But, you know, this is a bank.
I'm a
which has
Labour MP, Grant.
extre-
I'm a
incredibly-
member of a trade union like millions of
Right.
people, including who vote Tory,
But this
by
is
the
a
way.
bank who have... no, absolutely.
I bank with the Co-op.
Right. This is a bank who have incredibly close links, as you rightly say, for historic reasons with the Labour Party. And I think there are serious questions to be asked.
Will that
about these
include? Well,
relationships.
it's really important this because if it's not to be a political inquiry, will it include? There's a really good Guardian story that Nick will know, whereby the Co-op Bank have had something like 30 meetings with Mark Hoban, who's one of your ministers. Now, presumably, it will include all of that contact as well.
I don't think Mark Hoban or the Conservative Party have taken loans.
But it's had 30 meetings and you're in government, so it's quite
important.
important in terms of the issues you're
Well,
looking
I think
at.
it ran into serious trouble when the Britannia deal did not work well, happened in 2009. But it then went for the Lloyds, over the 630 Lloyds branches. And
The government have been encouraging.
in the process
Yeah.
of doing that,
Yeah.
well, the Labour Party certainly encouraged that. I don't know.
No,
did you
that's what
encourage-
Mark
Well,
Hoban was meeting them about, to encourage them to take these
but
Lloyds
that's when we
branches.
discovered
either,
this
did it?
huge hole, because actually it was Lloyds that discovered it. When Lloyds started the process of due diligence at the early stages to see, all right, can this bank afford to buy these branches, which is normal business practice to do that, he discovered it couldn't. And the Portuguese chief executive of Lloyds Bank discovered there was a huge hole in the balance sheet. That's what sent the current crisis. You will obviously have a few day labours on the defensive, on the Co-op and its funding and so on. But why do so many hedge funds give you money?
Well, we go out and we ask people to support our party. Actually, that's thousands of ordinary people who join up. But it's also, you're quite right to say, businesses or individuals
funds.
who want to support us.
Why do they do it?
Well, I'll tell you because they want to see this country be pro-business, pro-jobs and growing, which are the
Hedge
things that
funds?
are happening right now. But I'll tell you one thing, which is totally different. It doesn't matter whether you give £1 to us or £1 million to us.
It's usually $1 million.
You don't get...
From hedge funds?
Well, hold on. You don't buy a policy.
Really?
You don't install...
What, a tax cut
you
for
don't-
millionaires?
So hold on
Hold
a second. Hold on a second. You don't buy
dinner in
policy.
Downing Street?
Hold on a second. You don't get policy. You don't get to choose candidates, and you don't get to choose the leader.
So,
you get
all right.
nothing. This is a bad advert, but
No.
you get nothing for it.
All
other than the future
hold
of
on.
your- other than the future
Hold on,
of
let
your
me just
country being
pick you
secure.
up on that there then. So the hedge funds give you millions of pounds, but you say it doesn't buy policy, but you then went and cut the tax on hedge funds.
Well, hold on a minute. We've introduced a £2.5 billion.
You cut the tax on hedge funds.
Hold on. We've introduced, for example, a £2 billion annual tax levy on banks, which is more than you guys did when you were
overthink
in,
the bank bonus
every
tax?
single year.
What's the
of this-
answer?
of
You
this
say
Parliament.
they cannot buy policy. I'm not saying there's a
That's right, that's
correlation. I don't know a causation. But I look on the one hand that you're getting millions of pounds from hedge funds, and earlier this year, I think it was in the budget, you cut the tax on hedge funds. Now, ordinary people watching will think, hey, there has to be something
Right,
going
hold
on here.
Hold on. This is a big business in Britain, isn't it? You know, hedge funds are Citi, all of that stuff is a big business. We have been very, very clear that banks need to pay more and contribute more, and they're paying £2.5 billion
I'm not
more
talking about
each
banks.
year.
I'm talking.
We've made sure
by and large,
that-
banks don't give you
we've
money.
made-
You're not getting money from. Well, you own the RBS. You're not getting money from Lloyds. You're not getting money from Santander.
I'm talking
I
about
don't
the
think.
City in
I'm
general.
asking you about hedge funds. You said you can't buy policy. Supposing I'm a hedge fund, I give you millions of pounds. A few months later, hey, I'm off to the races. You just cut my taxes.
No, I mean, I'm absolutely clear about this. You cannot, I mean, it's not a very good advert, but you cannot buy policies by
Well,
giving
I
money.
think people
What-
just see
that
it
is,
on
that is
there.
Well, there was the tax
absolutely-
cut there, wasn't
Hold on,
there?
that's absolutely different from a situation where you select a leader, install candidates. We still don't know the full story from full
Unless
Kirk,
your name
unless
is
you're
Anthony
publisher.
Bamford and you're head of
Yeah.
JCB,
Well, hold on a
and you
minute.
get
Right to
to
report.
accompany the Prime
Well,
Minister
hold on a
on
minute.
trade
Hold
trip
on a
to
minute.
India,
Let-
where a factory is open, unless your name is Adrian Beecroft,
Hold on,
a
these are-
venture capitalist who wrote a report on
Wait a second. Are
hiring
you
and
telling
firing
me that
people at
people-
will.
are
But
you
clearly
telling
what
me-
the Prime Minister was doing was giving an opportunity to donors to write reports that were then being considered for policy in many
Are you
cases.
te-
Liberal
no,
Democrats had to stop
let
them.
me tell you as it is. If you're telling me that companies like JCB, who are an enormous British success story, don't, on their own accounts, deserve
Whose
recognition.
helicopter is put at the disposal of the Prime Minister
These
to
are
travel around the country.
businesses
I
which
think-
create thousands of
All
jobs in
right.
this country and around
All
the
right,
world.
we have to leave it there. But I think we've made the point. Big Watch, thank you. I'll see you on Sunday morning.
Oh,
Sunday
absolutely.
politics.
Reporting for duty.
Excellent. Carry on. Cheque will be in the post. Blank as usual. Not from the Co-op.